The 2024 Republican presidential field gets a second entry this week, and several other prospects are taking important steps toward candidacies as well. The former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley is scheduled to declare her intentions on Wednesday. Haley, you might recall, she was Donald Trump's first ambassador to the United Nations, will be the only declared Republican candidate other than her former boss. Trump, so far anyway, seems more concerned about the Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who is pulling together his own campaign team. Trump has repeatedly disparaged DeSantis in recent weeks, and the New York Times reports one big question as DeSantis gears up is whether and when to return Trump's fire. This from that story. Quote, for months, Mr. DeSantis has pursued a strategy of conflict avoidance, but now he faces the pressing question of how long this approach can work. Mr. Trump has spent weeks trying to goad Mr. DeSantis into a fight with rude nicknames like Ron the Sanctimonious. Our great reporters are back with us. That story also notes now he's calling him Meatball as well, apparently. It is interesting. Trump has posted a couple things about Nikki Haley, saying she promised not to run if he was running. She's disloyal. But he seems much more concerned about Ron DeSantis. And if you look at the polling, this is cited in 538 in the New York Times today as well. Ron DeSantis in the 30s ranks pretty good historically if you look at candidates early in the race, especially a guy who's never run before.
Yep. And if you talk to voters and you say, who do you want to be the Republican nominee? They often say Ron DeSantis. If they express discomfort with Trump, you say, okay, then who are you looking at? Ron DeSantis. The name rolls off of voters' tongues at this point. I will say that it is an interesting challenge. Hillary Clinton, when she ran against Trump, often responded to his daily slights and controversies, and in some ways it was the only way that she could get any headlines at all was to respond to him, and her policy message got completely lost. Joe Biden took a different tack. He really did not engage Trump in the day-to-day insults. He just didn't go there, and the coronavirus pandemic sort of helped with that, enabling him to ignore Trump, but he did, and that obviously worked out better for him. But a primary is a different beast than a general election, and you've got to figure Ron DeSantis is looking at all of, the wasteland of candidates from 2015 to 2016.
And so this is from, I've posed the question at this table, I know this as well, is Ron DeSantis the next Donald Trump or is he the next Scott Walker? If you roll back the tape to 2014, Scott Walker was very popular, getting a ton of attention on Fox News, came out and ran for president, and it was not successful. The polling graph we showed you, DeSantis has very high numbers for this early in a campaign. Goes back to, Ronald Reagan, Barack Obama, Ted Kennedy, very well-known names there. And so that's a good number for him, which is why Nate Cohn smartly writes in the New York Times today what sets Mr. DeSantis apart from Mr. Walker. To be blunt, how many people already say they want him to be president? Overall, DeSantis has 32% support. Mr. Walker, in contrast, was in single digits at 7%. So there is a difference in the numbers. The numbers can still be very different from standing on a debate stage where, forgive me, but Trump, Little Marco, Lion Ted, low energy Jeb, he's a human chainsaw.
Yeah, and right now there doesn't appear to be that much daylight between Trump and DeSantis. I mean, policy-wise, they lean very to the right. DeSantis sometimes more to the right than Trump. But one area, we were just talking about Social Security and Medicare, one area that Trump hit a lot of his Republican challengers on in 2016 was Social Security and Medicare, saying, I'm not going to touch this at all, which was a departure from the GOP, policy points at the time. And that's something that he's probably going to hit DeSantis on again, as well as Haley, as well as a lot of these other Republican potential challengers, because they all have a history of voting for cuts or changes to Medicare and Social Security.
And so the governors were in town this past weekend, include Republicans and Democrats. Spencer Cox is the new Republican governor of Utah. It's clear he doesn't want Trump. The question is, who should it be? He likes governors.
Sununu's fantastic. DeSantis, great
Hutchinson.
record. Asa's a good friend.
Nikki Haley,
all of those guys.
former governor.
Former governor, yeah. I would love a governor.
Over
yes.
anybody that serves in that building across the street in the Capitol.
Every day of the week.
It used to be, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, it used to be we got governors, right? But then we had Barack Obama, it was Senator Barack Obama, Senator Joe Biden, the former vice president too, Donald Trump, businessman. A lot of Republicans who don't want Trump are counting on one of these governors to get traction.
Right. There's a lot of built-in benefits from being a governor, right? In a way, just by being governor, that is campaigning in itself. You're able to hold daily press conferences about what you're working on. And so I understand why Spencer Cox is making that recommendation or wants to see a governor ascend to be Republican nominee. But this is also why Governor DeSantis doesn't really have to, I think, engage in this way with Trump right now. He is the governor. He can afford to have this strategy of conflict avoidance as much as possible because right now he doesn't have to sort of get in the mud with Trump based on the position he holds.
It's served him incredibly well so far. The question is, does it last?
Well, and he's been able to get in the mud with Mickey Mouse and, one culture war after another, making headlines and raising those numbers of voters who recognize
And
him.
I don't think those serve him well in a general election if he does clear the Republican primary, but it certainly works with the base voters.
At the moment, the question will be, when do we get 4 or 5 Republicans around a table like this or standing on a stage? And that will get interesting.